Again on October 5th, 1991. The month is moving right along. Here it's Saturday again, and it seems like the week just began. Do you like Saturdays, Sue?
Oh, sure. I love it.
Yeah, me too. How are you today, Richard?
I'm fine and ready for some headline news.
Good. Well, let's get right to it. Our first item today on page 25, left column, the bottom. Where are all the girls? Who's asking this question, Richard?
A lot of international human rights groups are asking what has happened to the little girls in mainland China. There seem to be surprisingly few of them in some areas.
Okay, well, let's listen to the reading, follow along with us, and then we'll discuss this question. But where are all the girls? China's 1990 census has dug up some disturbing facts. Apparently, 5% of the country's infant girls have disappeared. Have they been given up for adoption? Have they been raised secretly to evade the 12-year-old one-child policy? Or is there a darker secret? International human rights groups are increasingly concerned about the fate of the missing girls. American researchers fear that some may have been killed at birth by parents hoping for a son. Jin Min-gai, mayor of a remote rural community, strongly denies such accusations. There's no infanticide here, he declares. However, Mr. Jin could not explain how every couple in the village had managed to produce a son in the face of stringent family planning restrictions. Well, these are disturbing facts. China's 1990 census has dug up some disturbing facts, and perhaps the government didn't even realize what facts would be dug up by this census. What's happening, Richard?
Well, the census is a survey of the population, and it seems that 5% of the country's infant girls have disappeared since the last time a check was made. And people are wondering, well, what has happened to all these girls?
Right. Apparently, 5% of the country's infant girls have disappeared, or it seems as though 5% of these girls have disappeared. Then we see some questions. Have they been given up for adoption? What does it mean to give up for adoption?
If you give up for adoption, that means that you hand your child onto another family. Sometimes a couple cannot have children, so they like to adopt someone else's child. And so that may have happened to some of these girls.
Okay, so that's one possibility, that 5% of these young girls have been given up for adoption. Or have they been raised secretly to evade the 12-year-old one-child policy? What is that policy, Richard?
Well, the policy is that Han Chinese in the mainland are only supposed to have one child. The idea is that the population was growing too fast. And so most people, especially in the eastern and central and southern parts of mainland China, can only have one child.
Some people perhaps are raising children secretly. When the child is born, they don't fill out a birth certificate, they don't go to the hospital, but they raise the child secretly and they keep the child hidden at home, perhaps so that nobody knows there's an extra child in the family. They might do this to evade the one-child policy, or to get away from it, or to get around it, so that they can have more than one child. Or is there a darker secret? What's a dark secret?
A dark secret is something that is hidden that you don't want to look at because it's too disturbing to be faced. But some international human rights groups are now starting to face what could be a dark secret. They're not sure, but they are becoming more and more concerned and worried about the fate of these missing girls.
Right. American researchers fear that some may have been killed at birth by parents hoping for a son. What a terrible thought. Sue, do you think this is possible?
I don't know. I really don't know, but this sounds so disgusting.
Of course.
I heard of that, but, I doubt it.
Chinese parents do prefer a son, many of them, don't they?
Yes, I think so, but I doubt it they would kill their own girl just because they want a boy.
It certainly wouldn't need to happen here in the Republic of China because there's no limit on the number of children you can have if you have a girl. Well, that's okay. Try again and hope that you have a boy next time. But in the mainland, if you're only allowed one child and you really want a boy, there may be strong pressure on parents to kill their daughters when they're born. What do you think, Richard? Do you think this is possible?
I don't know. My mother often used to tell me that she wished she'd had a daughter instead of me because I'm an only son. And she often said to me, you know, if you have a daughter, you can go shopping with her and it's much more fun. So I know my mother would...
So are you the
Certainly
only
not.
son of your family?
I am, yes. But my mother really wanted a daughter. She was very disappointed when I appeared, I think.
When we see the 12-year-old one-child policy, that means this policy has been carried out for 12 years.
That's right. The government, the communist government there, is very concerned about the large population, and they want to slow the growth of the population. And so they've told people, one child only. Some of the minority groups are allowed to have more than one child, but as Richard said, the Han Chinese can only have one. And people sometimes try to find ways around these policies, ways to evade them. Let's go now to a remote rural community, somewhere way out, away from a main city. It's remote and it's rural. It's out in the country. And we hear from the mayor, Jin Min-gai. I'm not sure about the pronunciation there, Sue.
I'm not sure either because it's very difficult to know the Chinese name by reading the English names.
So we can say anything we want. It's
Yes,
okay, right?
yes, you may
Okay.
have your guess.
He strongly denies such accusations. Richard, what's an accusation and what does it mean to strongly deny an accusation?
An accusation is when people say that someone has committed a crime. If people accuse you, they say that you've done something wrong, that's an accusation. But Mr. Jin is strongly denying this. He's saying that it's not true. In fact, he declares there's no infanticide, murder of children here.
Well, we sure hope not. However, he could not explain how every couple in the village had managed to produce a son in the face of stringent family planning restrictions. Can you explain that sentence a little further, Richard?
Sure. Mr. Jin is faced with the problem that if there is no infanticide, how has every couple in the village got a son? They're only allowed to have one child, and there they are, all with a son. Stringent family planning restrictions. Stringent means strict or enforced very, very strongly. And family planning is trying to control the number of children that you have. So it does seem a little bit unlikely that considering these one-child restrictions, every couple would naturally produce a son. And also maybe even a little bit unfortunate because there aren't going to be any girls for all these wonderful boys to get married to when they grow up anyway.
That's right, and I have read that this is a problem that the mainland is going to have to face in the future. There are going to be millions and millions more young men than women. And young men who can't find mates, who can't find wives, might be frustrated and might present a big social problem in the society. So sometimes these policies seem wise, but in the future they can bring problems worse than the original problem. So we will see. To do something in the face of a problem or in the face of something, what does that mean, Richard?
That means in spite of. Here, of course, there are stringent family planning restrictions, but every couple has a son. So in the face of means in spite of. So really, yeah, it's really the same idea.
Okay. Sue, do you think they use some kind of special Chinese herbal medicine to produce sons every time?
I don't know.
I doubt it. I don't think there's any secret. Or
I have two daughters.
And you're very proud of them, Sue.
Yes, I am.
I don't know if anybody's devised a way yet to determine or to make sure that you have a boy or a girl when you give birth. Richard, do you know if anybody's following up on this information, if anybody's watching to see what's really going on?
There are several international human rights groups which are trying to do that, but it's not easy because most of these infant girls are supposed to have disappeared out in the countryside. It's much easier to do that out in the countryside. In the big cities, this doesn't really seem to be so much of a problem. Also, in the big cities, many of the Chinese people are more open to having daughters because they're a bit more modern and maybe a bit more liberal. It's out in the countryside where the idea of having a son, I think, is more important, and also where it's harder to check up on what people may be doing.
I think daughters are wonderful. I mean, if we didn't have daughters, we wouldn't have any women. I wouldn't have a wife. I'd have a big problem, Sue.
But Benjamin is cute too.
He's cute. Yeah, I'm thankful for my son. All right, let's move on. We'll talk about Taiwan being readmitted to the UN. So we're down on, I think it's line 26, page 25. UN reentry resolution goes through. Lyman, let's hear the reading. UN reentry resolution goes through. The Legislative Yuan passed a resolution calling on the government to seek re-entry to the United Nations at an appropriate time. KMT legislator Huang Juwen introduced the resolution, citing as a parallel the application of the two Koreas to join the UN. "We should try to get out of isolation," he said. The resolution poses a sticky problem for the government. The Executive Yuan fears that reapplication would not only be in vain, but might also increase tension across the Taiwan Strait. Presidential spokesman Hu Chichang tentatively welcomed the resolution on the grounds that it could help the ROC develop diplomatic status. He cautioned that the ROC should wait until the time is right to reapply. For the time being, it should work at building up its practical strength in the international community. Well, I must apologize for the condition of my throat when I did those reading tapes. I think I was fighting against air pollution in Taipei, or maybe I had a little bit of a cold, but doesn't sound very good.
That's
I'm sorry
okay.
about
We have
that.
more varieties.
All right. A UN re-entry resolution goes through. Can you explain this title, Richard?
Well, there has been the idea going around recently within the KMT that maybe it's high time for the Republic of China to reapply to enter the United Nations. It's been inspired by the two Koreas jointly applying to the UN. So if there can be two Koreas in the United Nations, maybe there could be two Chinas.
Okay, so was there a resolution in the UN that went through?
Right, the Legislative Yuan actually passed a resolution or a motion calling on the government to try to apply for re-entry to the United Nations. But they did say at an appropriate time. They don't want to push it until they can be sure that it would not just be thrown out straight away.
It's funny, when I said UN, I meant the United Nations, and you thought I meant the Legislative UN. Well, that's okay. That's kind of funny in a way, isn't it? The UN, the UN.
Sorry, John.
No problem.
It's getting to the stage where my Chinese is better than my English.
So, now it's official policy for the Republic of China to seek re-entry to the United Nations at an appropriate time. As Richard said, not to push it, not to be in a hurry, but someday, perhaps the door will open again. We know that in 1971, the UN expelled the nationalist government of the Republic of China from the General Assembly. They said, we're going to let the communists in, and you're out. And they threw the Republic of China out of the United Nations. And perhaps that was a big mistake for the United Nations to make. Unfortunately, these decisions are made in a democratic way, and the communists have many friends in the United Nations, and at that time they had even more friends than they do today. And it was easy for them to get a vote together and and do this kind of thing, unfortunately. And then in 1978, the Americans ended official diplomatic relations with the Republic of China. And since that time, it's been difficult for the ROC. It's been a time of isolation, right, Sue?
Right.
International isolation. But now things are changing again. It seems as though because of its economic clout, the Republic of China is working its way back into the world community and acceptance in the world community. We have this KMT legislator. Sue, you'd better say his name so we get it right.
Huang Zhuwen.
Okay, that's your last name too, isn't it? Huang.
Yes,
Yes, but...
my maiden name is Zhuang.
Okay. So he was the man who introduced the resolution. He brought it before the legislature, the Legislative Yuan, and he cited a parallel. What does it mean to cite a parallel, Richard?
To cite means to bring up or to mention. So he mentioned that there was a parallel, an example like the Republic of China, and that was the application of the two Koreas, North and South, to join the United Nations. And he felt that if two Koreas can do it, then it was time for the ROC to try to get out of isolation. And this idea of isolation, like we've just explained, is the idea of being alone or being apart without formal ties to other countries.
Right. Do you know anything about the background of Korea before the war, the Korean War? I wonder if Korea was a member of the United Nations. I'm not sure about it. But it seems that neither North Korea nor South Korea right now is a member of the UN, and together they're working for entry as separate, maybe not separate nations, but separate areas to join the UN. And I think they're cooperating with each other, aren't they, Richard?
Yeah, they are just about going along together with it.
I think if North Korea had got in first, they might try to keep South Korea out. And unfortunately, because the communist government is a member of the United Nations, they probably will try to block Taiwan acceptance or ROC acceptance. But that could change too. You never know what can happen in a year or two.
Right.
Okay, so we should try to get out of isolation. What are some advantages for the Republic of China to be out of isolation, Richard?
Well, for a start, it would make the ROC much safer. There is always the worry that one day, if a very hardline communist leader came to power in mainland China, that they could threaten to use force to take Taiwan back into the whole China. But if the ROC was in the United Nations, then the other countries would have an obligation to protect it, just as they did when Kuwait was invaded. Right now, because mainland China has a seat, and mainland China says that Taiwan is a province of China, there is no obligation for the UN to protect it, because it would be a civil war, not an international conflict. So from that point of view, there is a big advantage.
There could be benefits also from the point of view of trade and relations with other nations in the world, perhaps tourism and exchanges of technology and information and things like that.
I think we can also lift up our international status in the world.
Right. Okay, but there's a bit of a problem. This resolution, or this suggestion, or this idea, this decision, it poses a sticky problem for the government. Richard, did somebody spill their orange juice on the resolution? Is that why it's sticky?
No, the idea of sticky here is that you might get stuck in it. It's something that, like if you walk across mud, your feet might get stuck in the mud. And so this resolution is that kind of a problem, because the Executive Yuan fears, first of all, that if they try to reapply, it might be in vain. Mainland China could straight away block it, and that would leave the ROC looking a bit foolish for trying to reapply. And also, they are worried that it might build up tension across the Taiwan Strait. Recently, relations between the government here in Taipei and the government in Beijing have been getting a bit more friendly, with some exchanges and more freedom to travel, and they don't want to lose the opportunities that has brought about.
Okay, so if this didn't work out, if the Republic of China applied and they went through the process and there was debating and, lots of information about it on the front pages of the newspapers around the world, and then it didn't work out, in a way it would be like losing face, wouldn't it? It would be an embarrassment. And then there might also be increased tension between the mainland and Taiwan. Okay, so what happened? The presidential spokesman, what's his name, Sue?
Hu Zhiqiang.
Hu Zhiqiang. He tentatively welcomed the resolution on the grounds that it could help the ROC develop diplomatic status. He tentatively welcomed the resolution.
Tentatively means cautiously, carefully. He welcomed it, but he was also a little bit careful about being very enthusiastic. But he did feel that the resolution might help the ROC develop diplomatic status. It might lift the ROC's status in international terms. And when we say on the grounds that means on the basis that, for the reason that.
Okay. We see that this was the presidential spokesman speaking. Would he be speaking on behalf of the Executive Yuan, perhaps?
I was checking this because here in English we see the word spokesman. S is it lowercase s, and so that might not be the official spokesman, because if this is official spokesman, then it should be capitalized S. No?
I don't
Not
think so.
necessarily, but we know that the resolution was passed in the legislative UN. The executive UN relates to the president and the executive branch of government. Is that right?
Yeah, I tried to check Mr. Hu's position in this in 总统府. Then they told me he is the secretary of the news department.
In any case, we could say that the legislative branch is a little more eager about this than the executive branch or the executive UN is.
Yes.
So there may be some discussion going back and forth between these two branches of the government before an application is made to the UN. Okay. This Mr. Hu also cautioned that the ROC should wait until the time is right to reapply. I wonder when that would be.
I think he means wait until they can be sure that the mainland will not crush a reapplication. I think they want to build up better relations with the government of the mainland first and test out how they would feel about reapplication. There's no point in reapplying if it's not going to get anywhere, and the government here is sensible enough to realize that.
Okay, good. So in the meantime, or for the time being, for now, until the time that we do go ahead and apply to rejoin the UN, for the time being, we should work at building up practical strength in the international community. What would practical strength mean here, Richard?
Well, of course, the ROC does have a lot of things to offer the international community. Money, technology, trading benefits. There are many ways that Taiwan can influence the world around it, and as it does that, it will build up practical strength. Also, there are Asian groups like the ASEAN nations, which it might be easier to join first, and then once the ROC has got a foothold in those groups, then it can work its way up to making a re-entry application to the UN.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Or GATT.
GATT, yes.
Right,
General
right.
Agreement on Tariffs and Trades. Tariffs and Trade. Right. Sue, you've got 2 minutes. Look at this article. Are there any problem areas or things you'd like us to go over again before we say goodbye?
Oh yes, we can look at line 16. We see the phrase on the grounds. This is grounds in plural form. But is there any difference if I say on the ground? What does that mean?
If you say on the ground, that would mean the ground like the floor or the earth. If we want to use it in this sense of for the reason, you must say plural grounds.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe you want to tell me that somebody should be fired from the company. I might ask you, on what grounds do you think this person should be fired? For what reason? What are your grounds for saying so? Well, it's the end of a very well-written headline news article, very interesting, the end of another week, and we hope you'll have a good day tomorrow. Have a good rest. Take some time on Sunday to rest. And we hope you'll join us on Monday with a new article in Advanced Studio Classroom. We also would like to invite you to join us at our youth rally on Saturday night. If you live in Taipei or near Taipei and you have some time on Saturday night, come and join us. We have a lot of fun, don't we, Richard?
We certainly do.
That's right. You can meet your teachers, have a chance to talk in English, and have some fun at the same time. We also invite you to our Bible studies Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock here at Studio Classroom. You can look in your magazine and get the details, addresses, and times. Thank you for being with us, students. We look forward to talking with you again soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Excuse me, sir. I'm taking a survey. May I ask you some questions?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Here's the first question. What is your favorite Chinese holiday?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Why not?
That's a very personal subject. I prefer not to talk about it with strangers. Is there anything else you'd like to know?
Yes. What is your favorite American food?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Is it too personal?
No, it's just that I don't like any American food. Is there anything else you'd like to know?
I don't think so. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. I'm always glad to help.
To find out what people in Taiwan really like, and much more, read October Advanced Studio Classroom.
20点整。
汉声广播电台。We study English in the morning, just as the sun begins to shine. No use debating, classmates are waiting, so get me to the class on time. Our country has a shining future. We like the modern world just fine. We like the teachers, we like the lessons, so get us to the class on time.
Join us today on Basic Studio Classroom for Introduction to the Classics.